All right, National College Football Roundup. Really just want to talk preseason AP top 25. And I know it doesn't mean everything, Ted, but I still believe preseason rankings play a role in college football.
They do, especially for some of the maybe the lesser known Power 5 teams, or maybe not even the Power 5 schools like a Cincinnati or someone. You have to start in a pretty good spot to work your way to that position.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. So when you look at the top 10, you've got Alabama at number 1, Ohio State at 2, Georgia at 3, Clemson at 4, Notre Dame checking in at 5, Texas A&M at 6, Utah at 7, Michigan at 8, Oklahoma coming in at 9, and Baylor coming in at 10. Some other notables: Oklahoma State at 12, USC at 14, and Texas coming in at 27th. So unranked when it comes to the preseason AP top 25. Also, LSU not ranked, which it's got to be the first time in forever they haven't been in the preseason poll. But when you just look at that top 10, Ted, first of all, let's start with OU at 9. How are we feeling about that? Because you are one of those guys you like. You know what the expectations are at OU, clearly, but you do like starting a little lower than higher. So are you comfortable with 9? Are you all good with that?
I'm comfortable with 9, and I think it's fair. At the end of the season, do I think we'll be number 9? No, I think we will finish higher than number 9. But preseason poll, I think number 9 is totally fair. And quite frankly, whenever you look and you remember all of the things that people said starting, whenever Lincoln Riley left, and the transfer situation and how it all went down and where we are now, it's almost a shock that the AP put us at number 9. I bet there's a lot of people out there that are like, wait a minute, Oklahoma at number 9? How could that be? Lincoln Riley's out at USC. So I think, all things considered, I was kind of shocked that they put us there, but I think it's fair.
I think it's fair, and I think there are several factors, and it's not like it's, we didn't see the same thing in the coaches poll. We did, right? But there's a lot of excitement. I think there's been a lot of recognition when it comes to the momentum that Venables has created. I think, and I especially think people are taking notice. Like we talked with Josh Pate about what they're doing on the recruiting trail. Mm-hmm. I think that's getting a lot of people's attention. I really do. And I think that's having people look at OU and being like, okay, they're going to be good, aren't they? Yeah. And the other factor in this whole thing is, man, the schedule's favorable. I mean, It is. We have to be realistic about that. I mean, you look at it, the trip to Lincoln, that's going to be tougher than people think. Like,
I agree.
That place is going to be rocking for that game in the non-conference. But then you look at the Big 12 slate, you get Kansas State, Baylor, and Oklahoma State at home. Of course, you get Texas at the Cotton Bowl. So that means the 4 other teams that a lot of people view as being the teams in the top half of the conference entering the year, you don't have to play a single one of them on the road. It doesn't get much better than that when you look at anybody else's conference schedule around the country. Like, that's as good as it gets, man. So
there's no doubt.
So the schedule is, I mean, it lines up for OU being undoubtedly a top 10 team when this season's over. And I don't know how some of these people vote. I don't know if it's, okay, you look at last year a little bit and you're projecting a little bit. I don't know if some people just say, hey, I'm just going with the projection of how I think the year's going to finish out. I don't know how a lot of these AP voters approach it, but when you look at how everything is lining up for OU, you got the momentum and you got the schedule, man.
I totally agree. Momentum, schedule. I think there's been maybe a slow realization that Oklahoma's roster was not totally decimated by the transfer portal, which was a narrative that was out there. When it's just not true. Transfer portal, and I guess you could say guys going to the NFL, but every single team has a ton of guys that not a ton guys that go to the NFL. Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, everyone that's in front of us lost several players to the NFL. It's something that you deal with. So I think that after everyone could kind of catch their breath a little bit and maybe take a look at what Oklahoma has and maybe pay attention a little bit closer to what people near the program are saying and what they think about it, then it's not shocking. Now, I will say this. I would be mad if I was Baylor, and I, quite frankly, would be okay if Baylor was number 9 in front of Oklahoma, considering they shoved our nose in our own poo last year in Waco to the tune of like 45 rushes for like 280 yards. That was bad. So they've earned that spot in front of us, in my opinion.
No, they don't have anyone coming back along the line of scrimmage on that team.
Yeah,
they have them all coming back, but it is, yeah. I think the uncertainty around Blake Shapen probably has a lot to do it. And then they lost their 2 top backs in Ebner and Abram Smith. They lost Tyquan Thornton, their best wide receiver. There's some question marks for them at the skill position. I think Shapen really elevates the ceiling of that Baylor offense with Jeff Grimes, with what he can do when it comes to pushing the ball down the field and some of that extended play action stuff that they can do off that wide zone. But they're going to be good on defense, right? Because they're going to have a badass defensive line. So I wouldn't have been upset if Baylor was ranked ahead of OU, right? They're the defending champs. Maybe they deserve that, but I think it's probably more of an acknowledgement that OU's got the schedule you want to have. I think the schedule's got is really a
if
big
you think those 2 teams are close, the games in Norman, maybe that's the edge. But
right.
I still believe that regardless of what happens in the regular season matchup, we're on a collision course for Jerry's World.
Yeah, no, I those are the 2 teams I would pick to play for it right now. There's no doubt. Okay, a fun exercise. So typically there's about 2 teams in the top 10 that end up unranked at the end of the year. When you look at the top 10, who do you think is most likely to be those 2 teams?
The Texas A&M easily that's number 1. Number 2, unranked Michigan.
I mean, they got a lot back. I know they lost a few guys, but especially edge rushers, right? Aiden Hutchinson, yeah, he was good. Ajabo, yeah, he was good. But you'd think they could lose that many games where they end up unranked?
I've got to pick 2. And, I mean, A&M is 1. I don't think it's Utah. I guess you could say maybe Utah loses to Florida, and I just think they're so much stronger than the rest of the Pac-12. Notre Dame, they've got a tough schedule. They've got to play Clemson. They play USC late, which I don't think USC is going to be good, but they play them the last game of the year. USC they're going to play the best version of USC that anyone sees all year. So, and who knows what they look like injury-wise.
Notre Dame, by them. They start the season at Ohio State.
Yeah.
Which, yikes.
I think they have played BYU also.
Got BYU on October 8th. That game's in South Bend. They've got Clemson. North Carolina. I mean, they've got Clemson. That game's in South Bend. But, yeah, and then USC to finish. Like, it's not an easy schedule for the Fighting Irish. And I think you and I both agree that Marcus Freeman, he's going to be a really successful head coach, but he's also, it's his first time doing it also.
Yeah. That's a tough schedule, but I think they're going to be fairly tight with Ohio State. I think they lose that game, but I think it's going to be tight. I like them. Like they may lose to Clemson, but if you lose to Ohio State, Clemson, and throw BYU in there, you're not going to be unranked at the end of the year, right? But I don't know. Who would you take?
I think you got to look at Texas A&M. Now, I know people don't want to hear it, but that is a really talented football team. Like on the hoof, that squad looks the part, but they were 8-4 last year. They still have QB questions heading into the year. Now, very talented once again, but the schedule, man, it's tough.
Brutal.
SEC West schedule, Florida and South Carolina in the crossover games from the East. They've got a non-com game against Miami. They could easily be 8-4 again. I mean,
easily be 8-4. And frankly, if you look at what happened to them last year, they easily could have been way worse than 8-4 a year ago with how it went down. They almost lost to every single person in their division. I think the only team they beat was Auburn.
Remember, they beat Bama because Zach Calzada had an out-of-body experience.
But that's kind of my point, though, is like they beat Bama by 3 in a game that Bama probably wins, 9 out of 10 times if they play that. So, like, if they don't pull that one off, like that season looks way different. And I don't know. I think that they're going to be about the same as they were a year ago. And you're right. That stretch, though, that they've got, they got Miami, Arkansas, at Mississippi State, at Alabama, at South Carolina, Ole Miss, and Florida, all in a row. That is a really, really tough run. And they lost to 1, 2, 3 out of those 5 teams, and Alabama was one of the teams that they beat, and Alabama is going to destroy them this year in Tuscaloosa. That's just how it's going to go. That's what's going to happen in that game. There's going to be a heavy revenge factor.
Yeah.
Especially with the offseason that those two squads have had.
Yeah. As much as Jimbo and Saban want to make it sound like they've made up, we know how I think we know how that thing's going to go in Tuscaloosa. One thought I have is, when you think about a top 10 team that could end unranked, Baylor. You and I think we have an incredible amount of respect for Dave Aranda, Jeff Grimes, what they are doing offensively and defensively. But when you look at what that team could be, what happens if Blake Shapen just doesn't play well? Right. Yeah. And they lose some of these 1-score games that they won last year. Right now, I think they're to be really solid at the line of scrimmage, but what if Shapen turns it over a lot? And now he's really talented, but that possibility exists, right? So what if they can't run it as effectively as they did, and they can't put Shapen in really, really manageable and fortuitous situations as a passer? I mean, then you could see him struggle a little bit. I could see that happening.
Yeah. And one of the things about Baylor is, even though we really respect what that program has done recently, the name, that could be a name that drops in the polls quicker than others.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know that nationally their program and how they operate, how Aranda operates, is respected nationally like it is in the Big 12. So, yeah. And, you lose that first tough non-conference game against BYU. You're at Iowa State in the 4th game of the year, and I think that Iowa State team is one that maybe we've forgotten about a little too quickly. But yeah, I'm with you on that. Baylor's definitely one to think about.
And then just being realistic about things, Dylan Gabriel got hurt. I think OU could be that team.
Yeah.
And that's nothing against General Booty, who came out with his own clothing line. That was awesome. Or Davis Bevel. But I just think that we've talked about how important he is for the football team. If he goes down early, could be in a really bad spot. right? I don't think that's going to happen. I think Dylan Gabriel's going to stay healthy all season long. He's going to have an extremely productive year. But if he were to go down early, like in one of these non-conference games, that'd be quite the disaster for OU football, in my mind.
No doubt. And that's not a problem unique to Oklahoma.
Right.
If you look at a lot of the teams in the top 15 or so, if they were to lose their quarterback, all the things get hairy really, really quickly. So, yeah, but you're definitely right. It doesn't take much if the guy at the helm that has the ball in his hands every single snap offensively goes down, things can go sideways really quickly.
Yeah. Also, Clemson replacing your OC and your DC. Uyunglele was bad last year. Now you're expecting them to be better, but I mean, they got so much talent. I can't imagine they fall out of the top 25 entirely. But some questions that we haven't had.
Definitely.
We haven't had about Clemson in a long, long time. So they're certainly an interesting football team as we head into the season.
Yeah. Yeah. If they don't like, I'm willing to look past last year that Uyunglele had because of how poor the offensive line was. They got decimated by injury, but you look at his stats, he was like a 50% completion guy. It's really, really bad.
There's no other way to say it. He sucked last year.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like the Klubnik kid, a lot of people say he's right on his heels, and he may not have a very long leash before they make that change.
Yeah, we'll see. A couple unranked teams. Texas, I don't know. It's just funny. That's kind of funny. Kansas State.
Shocking, right? Even though I agree with it, it's still shocking.
It was a little shocking, but after the last week, I bet some of those AP voters, with all the injuries.
Considering Saban voted him number 1 in the country last week in the coaches poll.
Yeah. Kansas State, when you you look at people receiving votes, they're all the way down there at 37. I think they're a team that they could play their way into being a top 20 team by the end of the year. Penn State checking in, when you look at the votes, checking in at 29. Man, James Franklin's got a lot of talent on that roster. And if Sean Clifford, some people think he could have a Kenny Pickett-ish type jump this season. If they just get him to play decently and stay healthy, because remember, they fell off a cliff when he got hurt last year. I feel like people are really sleeping on Penn State. They got a talented roster.
They do, which, a couple of things from that. People could be sleeping on Penn State with how talented their roster is. The other part of that is, what if they're right? They just re-upped Franklin on a new contract whenever he hasn't really done anything, and he's had talented rosters. You got to be pretty worried, don't you? If you just re-upped your coach to a huge new contract and your preseason unranked, it's time to start doing something with that roster, right?
Yeah, you can't be pleased if you're the leadership at Penn State.
Yeah. Well, hey, he's really good at interviewing and getting raises.
Elite.
Which, hey, there's something to be said about that.
There's no doubt.